that is my left, kind of confusing. So for those of you who prefer to have a closer look, you may move and sit closer on my left side of the hall, your right side. And lastly, you are encouraged to ask questions at the end of the session. I will open the floor for Q&A. And you can just raise your hands and we'll call you out accordingly. All right, so that is all the house rules. To start the discussion today, I would like to pass the floor to Kirit. Kirit, could you quickly introduce yourself and then you can ask the first question to the speakers.
Okay. Thank you so much, Amelia. My name is Kirit. I'm currently a student at Taylor's University. So to start off, I'd like to pass the floor to YB Fuzia for an opening statement. Do you think you could share with us 3 current or upcoming government initiatives that are mitigating the cost of living, which every Malaysian youth should know about?
Thank you, Kiran. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon. And I would like to thank Amelia and Kirat for bringing me here. And it's my pleasure to share the afternoon, spend my time with young people talking about how to mitigate the cost of living among youth. Before I answer that question, allow me to define cost of living. Cost of living is what we need, or the amount of money that we need to ensure that we are able to live decently. What does it cover? Number one, it covers our accommodation. Is echoing, right? It should cover the cost of accommodation. Number two, of course, you have to think about your school fees. You have to think about your health care. Should you get sick? The cost of living covers health care. The cost of living covers transportation cost, food and drinks, and utilities. Usually these are the 6 areas that is defined as cost of living. So your internet bill, yeah, your data plan, so everything goes in this cost of living. So in general, the cost of living for a student, I think if you are on scholarship, or if your parents give you your monthly allowance, 800 ringgit a month is still difficult to survive in Kuala Lumpur. Yeah, so it is more than 25 ringgit per day, and I think in general the cost of living is high. Yeah, where you are as at right now. The data show that the cost of living is about 800 ringgit to survive. Okay, and just to share about the interesting things that youth can look forward to is our latest announcement by the government, which is the e-Belia Rahmah, where the government is providing an e-wallet of 200 ringgit to every student between the age of 18 to 20 who are studying full-time in whatever and whichever college, or whether it be college or institutions of higher learning. And a total of 400 million ringgit have been allocated by the government to provide the e-wallets to 200 million students. So that's something to look forward to. And you can start your application online starting 8 a.m. on the 26th of June. E-wallet, yeah. The second one that is under our ministry is the Menu Rahmah. Menu Rahmah. I've asked questions whether Menu Rahmah is available around college, but maybe it is not. But it is something that we can work on. We have Menu Rahmah, which is a meal that costs about 5 ringgit. A meal that has protein, carbo, as well as vegetables. At the moment, there's more than 2,000 outlets that offers Menu Rahmah, and most of them are from the fast food chains. KFC, McDonald's, Old Town White Coffee, all offers Menu Rahmah. At the same time, we also have Kedai Mamak that also offers Menu Rahmah. 5 ringgit meal. Some of them offer with drinks, some without drinks. Also, as another initiative from our ministry is our Menu Siswa Rahmah. Menu Siswa Rahmah is in collaboration with KPT, Kementerian Pengajian Tinggi, where a meal is offered at 350. It's about 10 ringgit per day for 3 meals in the day. So this is with some subsidies from the IPTs lah. So Menu Siswa Rahmah. The third one would be, I think, which all of you know, is the package perpaduan lah, which is the internet plan. So those are 3 initiatives that impact you directly. That are other initiatives that impact you indirectly, but I think I'll discuss that later. Thank you, Kirat.
All right, thank you so much, YB Fuzia, for that. To move on our opening statements to the next person, I would like to direct this question to Dr. Ong. Dr. Ong, can you share a little bit with us some areas of improvements? This could be gaps, barriers, or challenges that you've noticed in ongoing government initiatives to address the rising cost of living among youths in Malaysia today.
Okay, so I just want to make 3 points. Thank you very much, firstly, for inviting me to share the stage with my former colleagues in Parliament, YB Fuzia as well as YB Prabha. So thanks to Amelia and Kirat for moderating this session. I'd just like to make 3 quick points. The first point is to say that there are a lot of short-term factors that impact the cost of living, including in Malaysia, whereby students as well as the larger public need to be able to differentiate between those factors that we can control and factors that we cannot control. Right? So this is important because factors that we cannot control will continue to exert this kind of cost of living pressures as long as they exist. So for example, the war in Ukraine leading to higher wheat prices, higher chicken feed prices, which will then continue to feed into cost pressures on supply of chicken and eggs and whatnot, right? So those are the things that we may not be able to control that much of in terms of the input prices that are determined by global factors. The things that we can control, but there is a cost to these controls, would be things like how much petrol subsidy we give, how much electricity subsidy we give, how much subsidies we want to give to the people who are producing chickens and eggs and whatnot. So that we can control, but those kinds of issues will also have short as well as long-term consequences, right? So that's the first point. And when we understand the sort of like differences between the two, we're able to plan out better policies in terms of trying to ensure long-term sustainability from a supply standpoint and also from a cost standpoint. So perhaps one gap that I will highlight here is the decision by the previous government to ban the exports of chicken and eggs to outside the country, notably to Singapore, right? So in the short term, it may have, the government then may thought it would have scored a win in terms of trying to secure supplies for Malaysia, but in the longer term, it actually hurts our chicken and egg producers because Singapore would then do what they did, which was to look for other suppliers, which means that the amount of profits that our domestic suppliers can earn from places like Singapore where the exchange rate is higher would be lower. And because of that, they are not able to be as efficient, they are not able to cross-subsidize their local production, and that also has longer-term consequences from a production efficiency standpoint, right? So that's why it's important to know these short-term factors. Why it is important, so that we can not put in policies that hurt our longer-term potential. My second point is to do with planning for the longer term, right? So, okay, quickly. So for the second point, we need to be able to plan for the longer term in a coordinated way and in a way that is strategic. So for example, when we talk about wanting to have food security, not only must we try to ensure that we have enough domestic supplies, but we should also have the fail-safe of being able to import from more countries and also export to more countries. And this is part and parcel of the food security ecosystem in the world, which includes Malaysia. Let me tell you just quickly, one of the countries that has the highest resilience on the food security index is Singapore. And Singapore produces very, very little of their food. They import most of their food, and they have a very diversified range of sources, including Malaysia. The third and final point that I want to make is that rather than talking just solely on cost of living, we should also focus on quality of life, which means that in the longer run, we want to see higher wages being paid to you guys, to the students, to the larger Malaysian electorate, to the larger population of people who are working. And then we are able to then cope with some of the pressures from increases in the cost of living. Because if you think about it, countries like Switzerland, European countries, they have quite high cost of living. But because their quality of life, their wages, their public transportation system, their government services is also very high, then you are able to cope with the cost of living increases better and in a more systematic manner. So I'll stop there for now.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ong. To conclude our opening statements, I'd actually like to pass this next question to YB Prabha. Is there any possible solutions or best practices that we can adopt into providing a more meaningful solution for the rising cost of living for the Malaysian youth specifically? And to dive deeper, is there any lessons that maybe we can learn from other countries that we as Malaysia could integrate into our system?
Thank you, Kiran, and of course, the Deputy Minister, my ex-colleague, Dr. Ong, and of course, fellow Taylor students who are watching online and in front of me. And yes, it is a very interesting question whereby it's about cost of living. Actually, it is not only affecting the students, but it's overall. But today's narrative is towards students, so let me touch on a few things. Of course, the cost of living is there, the difficulty is there, but the government is responsible and taking a lot of measures to overcome these kind of issues. But when it comes to ideas to overcome this kind of inflation or cost of living, of course, the famous topic comes back, the subsidy. And the government has taken enough measures to give subsidies on petrols, food industries, and of course, utilities. Recently, we also decided that, you know, the utility subsidy for the B40s, M40s, and also the T20s, now is no more T20s. So we are focusing more on the B40s and M40s. Of course, it's not fair for the T20s to enjoy the subsidy. They have enough, enough money for them. But coming back to the solution and ideas, I think the government and the leadership is always hungry for ideas. And now we cannot focus on big projects about sustainability, whereby our country, just after COVID, we are more on trying to get the money flowing in the country and also to control the prices and everything. So my idea, which I already have discussed with many leadership and also the Prime Minister, is focus on circular sustainability system, whereby, let me give you an example. In other countries, such as India, when it comes to agriculture, the end product is agriculture waste. In our country, we have almost 500 million tons of agriculture waste every year, which is, we are not doing anything to it. We are just getting rid of it. But in other countries, they are turning the agriculture waste into food production, into agriculture production, such as the waste they use, they turn it into organic fertilizer to use for feeders, chicken feeders, and also agriculture fertilizers. So, but we are not focusing on that. Maybe there is a long way to go, but somewhere we need to start. So, I believe that we are in the right movement and taking enough initiatives to overcome the cost of living in Malaysia. And of course, Menu Rama, like what YB Fuzia said, that's one of the good measurement taken by the government. But of course, it's not permanent. But this is where we need to start from. If we just talk about sustainability in food security, we talk about cost of living, we can just keep on talking. But we need to start somewhere. So Menu Rama is one of the most impactful initiative done by the government. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So that concludes the opening statements by all of the speakers. Right now, we want to dive deeper into some of the points that have been shared across, but we will start with a little bit of unpacking of the problems. So I want to dive deeper into what Dr. Ong shared earlier, because Dr. Ong talked about, there are two categories which I thought was done beautifully, things that we can control and things that we can't control. So I want to focus a lot more on things that we can control indeed. In your opinion, Dr. Ong, what are some areas that you think are within the control of the government that they can sort of like work on to either understand the problems better or work on better, more efficient solutions?
Okay, 2 points this time, not 3. The first point is in the larger area to do with subsidy rationalization in this country. And I think the government is well aware of the kinds of things that it needs to do, but requires a certain level of political will. What do I mean by this? When the fuel subsidy or the petrol subsidy is given to everyone, the person who drives the Mercedes or the Ferrari traveling all over the country enjoys the same or even more subsidies compared to the person who is using much less petrol in a kapchai, for example, in a scooter. Right? But when you want to take away these subsidies or rationalize or perhaps reduce them on a gradual basis, definitely the larger public will have a negative reaction. Right? So what actually can be done is, as you reduce the amount of petrol subsidies, as an example, gradually over time, the amount of money that you can spend, especially the amount you spend on the T20, can be given back to the people, given back to the B40 and the M40 in different ways. So for example, I'm not sure whether you guys are aware, we spent about 30 billion ringgit on petrol subsidies last year, ballpark figure, right? The total allocation for the Ministry of Health is somewhere between 10 to 15 billion, right? So the petrol subsidies is twice that amount, right? So even if, let's say, we can reduce it from 30 to 15 billion, that money can be put into things like better public transportation. It can be given to, students, perhaps increase the allocation from 200 million to 400 million, 400 million to maybe 500 million, even more for the Belia Rama. Right? So that kind of messaging needs to be communicated so that whatever the government takes away, it gives back in a way that's clear to everyone in terms of what the direction is. Right? So that's the first point in terms of policies. Second point is something that's a bit more detailed, which is in every single industry, there are certain competitive issues, barriers, challenges, if you will, that prevents perhaps more people from coming into the market, prevents prices from being more transparent, prevents people from being able to pick and choose, the best option that they have, right? So even for universities, we're in tailors. You guys, those who are here, you pay quite a high fee. Hopefully, the value that you get is also commensurate with that high fee. But perhaps there could be a better index that can be produced, an index that can be produced by the Ministry of Education that shows how much a graduate will earn after they finish their university at different universities, so that you can compare what is the value that you can get for your education. And then things will be more competitive. Maybe if you pay more, then your salary may be more. But if, let's say, you pay more, your salary is not as high, then maybe you want to go to another university where you pay less, but your salary may be as good as well. So introduce competition and transparency and information in different sectors, and I think it will make life much better for the average consumer.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ong, for that informative and insightful answer. I would like to actually direct a question to YB Prabha. Do you think that there's enough political will to address the root causes of these problems that are arising at the moment?
I think compared to last time, now we have a better system, political system, and we have the Kerajaan Perpaduan unity government with 140 MPs in the parliament supporting the government, and we are in the process of doing a lot of policies and initiatives which going to help the people, especially the B40s and M40s. And by saying political will, if you want to make sure that that particular policy is successfully approved in the parliament, where the previous ministers used to come and we call it lobbying to the MPs during the briefing that support our policies and all such. But now with the government, which having more than 112 MPs, I think it's easy for the ministers and of course the PM to give out proper and comfortable policies for the people. So I think we are on the right track.
All right, thank you so much, Rabi Prabha, for that. I would like to ask this question because earlier we talked about the difference between cost of living and quality of life, for example. And I thought that's a very interesting perspective because oftentimes when we talk about the issue of cost of living, we're looking at the bare minimum. What do we need? What is the bare minimum that each of us need to sort of like, survive and stay alive? But Dr. Ong earlier just now talked about quality of life. And a big part of quality of life is wages, things, money that you earn, how much can your parents afford to, give you pocket money, for example. And that sort of like triggered my memory of a recent, I think uproar on social media about intern, bukan buruh, bukan something, about basically unpaid internship. I'm not sure to what extent would Wabi Fuzia be able to address this, but I'm just wondering, in terms of mitigating the rising cost of living, right? Do you think implementing something like paid internships or mandating something like that, what are your perspective on this in terms of mitigating the rising cost of living, which is a huge portfolio? Would you think this, would be something that would be helpful, for example?
Yeah, Milia, on interns, they are humans. They need to live. They need to survive. Definitely, they need to be paid. However, we don't have policies on that. And usually it is at the mercy of the employers. So I agree on that, and on that front, that we do need to have certain policies on internship. Not only that, most of the time, interns, we have to also to make sure that interns do learn something, and they're not made to do odd jobs, like running around, photocopying, filling in space, and doing things that to get things done. So I think that's something to look into. However, I would like to respond to Dr. Ong's comment earlier about subsidies. Currently, that we are working very hard on the subsidies. I would just like to share with the audience that the actual numbers that we spend, that the government spent on subsidies for the year 2022 was a total of 91 billion. 91 billion is about 1/3 of our total budget for the year. Imagine 91 billion, how many schools, new schools we can build, how many hospitals, and so on, and roads, infrastructure, that, and on top of that, we have to deal with hutang negara, yeah, which is about 1.3 trillion, which is a lot on us. But so, and before this, we do not have targeted subsidies. We have general subsidies. So anybody can go to the petrol station and get a subsidized diesel. Anybody can go to the petrol station and get subsidized RON 95. RON 97 is not a subsidized. Our LPG is also subsidized. Our cooking oil in packets. I want to share with you that we produce a quota of 60 million kilogram a month. And the total subsidy was 2 billion, more than 2 billion last year. So this is the numbers that we spend on subsidies, and yet we are working on getting it targeted. Okay, for example, if we have a car, which is Ferrari or Myvi, we need to have data from JPJ. And to know the income, we need to have data from LHDN. And if we want to know if this person is in the B40 category, we need to have database from IKASE, for example. But all our data cannot be integrated. The ownership of the data is the respective ministries or the respective agencies. So this is something that Ong Kiang Meng also knows very well, that we have talked about in Parliament. But now we are in the position to implement something. So we have already appointed a central agency, which is PADU under DOSM. Yeah, PADU under DOSM, which is looking into integrating all the data. So once we integrate all the data, then only we can look at, how much do you pay income tax, or you own a Ferrari, then you should not get subsidized petrol, for example. So we target that by the end of the year, we should be able to start targeting the subsidies on the fuel, petrol. We spent a total of 37.3 billion, that's the exact amount. So, and also apart from that, the border economy, where the foreign cars are also benefiting from our subsidized petrol. So it is a real issue. We have the will, we have the political will to move in that direction. First, we need to sort out our data, and we will embark immediately once we have the data in place. We're able to integrate that.
All right, perhaps
just one point. For the internship, paid internship, during Pakatan Harapan's time as government, I think YB Fuzia and Prava would know this as well. The government introduced a 900 ringgit minimum that's paid for interns in government. So that set the benchmark, and I think many people in the private sector also were ashamed, shamed into paying at least 900 ringgit a month. But of course, people would say that's not enough because minimum wage is 1,500. So we try to slowly get there.
All right, thank you for that. I want to dive deeper into this issue of subsidy now, because when we were asking or getting input from audiences, it's a very mixed feeling. So a lot of people say that, subsidies are really important. They're very scared at the prospect of not having subsidies anymore. But at the same time, there's a lot of also arguments surrounding this idea that, subsidies are not sustainable. For how long can government give out subsidies? We need to look at something that's a bit more long-term. And I think YB Prabha shared a little bit about, one of the potential long-term solution. So I want to hear maybe each of your opinion on this. How effective do you think subsidies are in the context of Malaysia right now? And whether or not do you think that is something that the government should continue for a foreseeable future?
I think I would like to comment this first. I think when we talk about subsidy, it's a very famous term, not only in Malaysia, but overall in many countries. Personally, I'm not a big fan of subsidy because, like we heard, 90 billion only for the subsidies is something we can also invest. The government can invest on other industries, example, job industries, maybe agriculture and developments, but we have no choice to ease public or people's problem. Subsidy is important currently. Without a proper wage, without a proper solution, without a proper policy, we cannot stop this subsidy. And you can all witness it during the COVID, when although there were subsidies, but we were lacking of chicken and eggs. And for your information, 1 year we eat 10 billion chickens, 12 billion eggs, if I'm not mistaken. And of course, I shared the idea from Dr. Ong just now. We stop exporting chicken because we feel that we need to secure ourselves. But at the same time, this is for your extra info, we never faced shortage of chicken and eggs ever in our history. And after COVID, we faced that. And this teaches us a lesson that we should focus investing in sustainability, circular systems, where we create our own industry without only hoping on imports. Because for your info, we are almost reaching 80 billion on imports. So this is my view on subsidies. Thank you.
Yeah, I think for subsidies, you need to look at the devil is always in the detail. You need to look at the specific subsidies and how it is being implemented. So for example, we spend about maybe 1.5 to 2 billion on rice subsidies alone. And the rice subsidies will be in the area of fertilizer, will be in the area of incentives for paddy planting, will be in the area of even the benih itself. But how much of this is actually going to the farmers? How much of it is actually going to people who control the fertilizer supply? How much of it is actually lost through leakages and whatnot? And at the end of the day, after giving all these subsidies, our rice self-sufficiency level is only at about 60%. It hasn't grown much over time. So there needs to be a way to try to improve the mechanics by which this money is spent, including in the larger let's say, paddy system, paddy production system. That's just one example. I'll give you another example, and let me know whether you think this is fair or not. There are people who have access to PT-PTN loans who get subsidies as well. So every time PT-PTN says, if you pay your loan in one shot, you get a 20% discount. That is a subsidy. But who are the people who are able to pay their loan off in one shot? These are not the people in the B40. These are the people maybe with rich parents, or maybe they are a little bit more, who are able to, let's say, get a good job straight after they graduate and are able to earn. And then these are the people who are probably in the T20 who are able to enjoy these subsidies. Right? So is that something that's fair? Is that something that we should give out? So, we need to look at it from a sector-by-sector perspective, from a perspective of efficiency as well as equity, and there's always room to improve in each of these areas where subsidies are given.
All right, so that's very interesting. We hear from YB Prabha, who's not a fan of subsidy, and then from Dr. Ong, we heard that we'll take questions at the end. We heard from Dr. Ong that, when it comes to subsidy, it's very important that all of us pay attention to the details about how, who's getting it, how is it implemented, is there transparency in the process and all of that. Of course, I would like to hear YB Fuzia's opinion on this. As someone who's actually handling the portfolio, to your mind, how effective do you think all of these programs and initiatives that focuses on subsidy? And given the choice, if you're able to sort of like reshuffle perhaps, would you still consider to continue giving out subsidies like in the way that we're doing it right now?
I would like to answer by giving you a formula. One is your income. Income minus cost of living is your disposable income. So in order to have quality of life, you need to have a big disposable income. Currently, I mentioned earlier that it costs about 800 ringgit. The cost of living is 800 ringgit per person. Imagine a family of 5 and your income is minimum wage. So you have negative disposable income. We have a big chunk of our population that is currently in that situation. We have a database of about 8 million families in that particular situation. So whether we like it or not, for now, while we increase the wages, while we look into the various initiatives to increase the income level, we do have to provide certain form of subsidies. However, we are doing our best to target it. Right now, we have difficulty with our database, but within our ministry, what we're doing is we're trying to target in a different way. For example, we passed in Parliament a budget of 100 million, just 100 million on Jualan Rahmah. Before this, there was Jualan Keluarga Malaysia and so on. But the difference with our Jualan Rahmah is that we are offering a new model, which is Jualan Rahmah Bergerak, where we are setting up trailers, one-tonners to go to the targeted areas like PPR, B40, Kampung or Taman, yeah, to bring in the subsidized items. For example, the eggs and the chicken and the cooking oil, gula, sugar. So, I mean, imagine the price of, the ceiling price for chicken is 940 per kg at the moment. I don't think can sustain because the cost of production is increasing, and I don't think we can continue to subsidize because they might, and I don't think we can continue to keep the price, the ceiling price, because eventually all these people, the industry players may just give up producing chicken, then we'll be in a crisis. So I'm not for the subsidies, but in the meantime, we need to look into how we help a certain target group, which is a targeted subsidy. So this is what we're doing. We're working on this Jualan Rahmah Bergerak. We are targeting to the groups, the localities where the people are, where the people live, where they are in the communities. So hopefully with that kind of targeted subsidies, while we increase the income level, while we work on the initiative Pendapatan Rakyat and increase the disposable income of our population, I think we do have to be selective on how we subsidize and how we make sure that it meets the right target group.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just to add on to the example, most of you may not be aware of this, but there was a precedent to the Jualan Ramah Bergerak, which is the Jelajah Jualan di Selangor, right? Which was started, about a year ago, because of COVID and all that, where the Selangor state government sponsored subsidized items, and this would be sent for sale in some of the areas that YB Fuzia talked about, PPR housing, low-cost areas, low-cost housing areas, places where we know there are a lot of poor people, and then the state representatives in Selangor, the ADUNs, would be there together with their team to coordinate this. So you would also lessen the burden on the Selangor state government. You have the local teams there to be able to execute this, and then people can see this is the immediate benefit that they can get, and it's in a very targeted form. Of course, there may be some who will go there and take advantage, but largely speaking, and I was participating in this when I was still an MP in my areas, you could see that it was reaching the B40 in these areas. So that's a good idea to move on at the federal level as well.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. Actually, I wanted to add on that when we are talking about subsidies, right, it's really difficult to ignore the issue of ketirisan subsidy. So, for example, like the subsidies being abused by certain parties and etc. So actually, I'd like to direct this question to YB Fuzia. Do you think you could give us some insight about what the government is doing to address the ketirisan subsidy?
There are many ways that we lose the subsidies, and they are very creative. They are very, very creative in finding ways on making profit from the subsidies. Diesel smuggling, even the cooking oil in the packets. People are always complaining that there's not enough cooking oil on the shelves. However, we know that we give quota to produce 60 million bags, 60 million kgs a month. And that is about 2 kg per person in this country. So what they do, sometimes they contaminate the oil and then they sell it for biodiesel, which is, then they make profit from there. So these are things that we have to deal with, and we're working on this. Our penguat kuasa is working around the clock. They work at weekends, they work overtime as well. If there's any complaints, and then they will just go and rush. But I'd just like to share about what we did with regards to the petrol station at the borders. Okay, before this, we control. We don't allow the foreign vehicles to come and take subsidized petrol. Yeah, but we cannot control 24 hours lah, because they will just find a way on how to get the petrol and go out again, because our petrol, the subsidized petrol, is so much cheaper. So what we did was, in February, we introduced 2 petrol pumps in Perlis, where the petrol pumps only sell non-subsidized petrol. So after 2 months of operation, we realized that there was a saving of 5.75 million in the 2 petrol pumps. Why? Because we don't allow them to go there and get our subsidized petrol, so they have to go there, and they self-regulate. It is still cheaper than in Thailand. Still cheaper. So they buy the non-subsidized petrol. And I think controlling is one way, but liberalizing is also another way, where we open it up and they say, look, this is where you go to. You're not allowed to take our subsidized petrol. So that pilot project proves that, that it is a viable project. So we're thinking of extending it to all borders, maybe in Kelantan, Perak, Kedah, and also Johor. Yeah, but and there are a lot of applications as well right now for all these non-subsidized petrol stations. So that's an example lah. So we have to really look into the details lah, like Kian Ming say, look into the details and how can we actually save the subsidies, the people's money, the rakyat's money. So the responsibility is on us to find ways on how we can do the savings.
Thank you so much, YB, for sharing that. I guess in a context where people who abuse, that contributes to this issue of ketirisan subsidy, for example, as they get more creative, then the government's response has to equally be as creative to address these issues. Thank you so much to the speakers. I would like to move on to the solutions part of the discussion. And we will start taking questions at around 5 o'clock. I would like to direct this next question to Dr. Ong and YB Prabha, because both of you talked a little bit about solutions. Dr. Ong mentioned about, long-term coordinated and strategic solutions that the government could implement. And YB Prabha earlier mentioned about circular sustainability, which I would love to hear more about. But the question I want to put to the floor for both of you is this. When we look at existing or ongoing government initiatives to address the issue of rising cost of living in Malaysia right now, the question is, do you think they are effective? And if so, what areas do you think are efficient, or what areas do you think would need further work on based on the existing initiatives? Either one of you can go.
Thank you, Amelia. So basically, sustainable circular system is whereby, I give you an example. Let's talk about rubber tappers. Our country used to be one of the biggest export in rubbers during the 80s. And now our country is the biggest import of rubbers. We are the third, if you talk about more specifically. The first is America, the second is China, and we are in the third, the biggest import of rubbers. And for your information, 60% of our rubber trees are not being tapped. And this is a huge issue in our country, which no one shares. Of course, the urban, our issues are different. We talk about cost of living. But for the rurals, this is also a major issue. And of course, government is giving them enough subsidies and allowances for them to run their daily lives. And of course, their business. Why I'm touching on this is when we have a circular sustainability mechanism, we can identify this kind of issues, and we can somehow create a solution within the problem. Like, why there are 60% of the rubber trees are not being tapped. The first issue, the fertilizers are very expensive. The subsidized fertilizers who the rubber tappers are using, some of them are selling the fertilizers to other companies. They feel that there is no future in rubber tapping. So in this way, our government should have enough ideas or create ideas to give them fertilizers. How about homemade fertilizers, Malaysian made? We don't do that, because fertilizers we only expect from other countries. We import them, such as chicken feeders. We import them from Ukraine. And of course, due to the global, the war, Russian war, the fertilizers, the feeders price has gone up. And who are suffering? We are suffering. So these are the long-term ideas and solutions we need to look after. And that's why I call it sustainable circular initiatives. And moving on your question, whereby is this a proper permanent solution? Yes, I think currently subsidies, like I say, I'm not a big fan of subsidies, but we have no choice. We have to somehow make sure the cost of living, the inflation, we have to look after it. That's why it's targeted subsidies. We are no longer giving subsidies just like that. Because what is the end product? I think the end product after the subsidy is government is losing money. And when government lose money, and we need to somehow find a proper channel to get back the money. That's why the tax goes up and many things. Fortunately, our PM is aware of all of this. And yesterday, he was in a program. He announced cukai taksiran, assessment tax discount, 25%. So these are the things we are also happy to hear. At the same time, it contributes to the public. And also he announced from 400 ringgit rent of local hawkers, now it's reduced to 200 in Bandar Tun Razak. So these are the few things which we think it's small, but it gives a major impact on those hawkers. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think I would want to switch the conversation from subsidies to productivity as a way of trying to address these issues in the longer term. Because when you are able to focus on increasing productivity in different sectors across the economy, it would eventually, and I hope very quickly, lead to increase in wages. And it goes back to the quality of life issue that I talked about earlier. And I'll give you an example. When you think of the country of Netherlands, you of course may think about football, right? But they are also one of the most productive agriculture producers in the world. Whether it's talking about milk or even fresh cut flowers and things like that. They are tulips and things like that. So whichever sector that they choose to focus on, they become the best in class. They become very productive using the limited land and resources that they have. And as a result of that, they are able to increase the wages and salaries of even people who are working in the agriculture sector. We can do the same by the use of increased technology, such as, for example, drone-enabled mapping, better IoT to be able to measure the effectiveness of your fertilizer, being able to map out the terrain better so that you can utilize this fertilizer better and be able to use these kinds of data capture facilities to enhance the productivity of your land. That's just the land part. What about in other areas in services, for example, right? All of you, during COVID would have, after the economy opened up, would have seen many more restaurants using scanning, right, to be able to order directly. And I think that's not just productivity from the perspective of saving labor, but also I think the companies may end up even earning more, because when you have that scan code, whenever you want to go and order extra stuff, you just scan it and then you can order more. Whereas previously, you may have hesitated from ordering because the staff is busy, you don't know how long it'll take, you don't know how long it'll be delivered. But now everything is sort of like on the QR code. It becomes much faster as well. So then, the productivity cycle leads to more orders, more profits for the F&B outlet, and hopefully more profit sharing or higher wages for the staff as well, those who are still there. And this becomes not a circular system, but a circular kind of a momentum to be able to increase productivity, wages, and then finally the quality of life.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Ong, for that. Very, very interesting perspectives. Before Kirat asks the final question, I would just like to remind everyone, we will start the Q&A with the audience at around 5. So please prepare your hot questions to be asked to any of the speakers. We'll open the floor after this, but last question that we will ask to the speakers, I'll pass the floor to Kirat.
Thank you, Amelia. Actually, I want to ask YB Fuzia, would you like to respond to any of these suggestions and ideas presented? And more than that, do you think that any of these ideas could be feasible for the government to implement?
Yeah, definitely. I would like to respond to YB Prabha's idea on circular sustainability. But before that, I'd just like to share my thoughts, my ideas on what are the game changers. How can we change the trajectory? How can we not talk about subsidies all the time? How can we not continue to be under the situation, in a situation where we are victims to the environment, economic environment, I mean? I would like to bring the consumers, the perspective of the consumers. How can we empower our consumers? Because a lot of the price, the price is actually determined by supply and demand in a free market economy like Malaysia. So if the price of the chicken is high and everybody still wants to eat chicken, so of course the demand is so high, so the price of chicken will not go down. So I mean, if we become smarter as consumers, and we actually can be powerful in determining the supply and the demand. At the moment, we did a consumer empowerment index survey, and we find that Malaysia is average in terms of consumer empowerment. For example, when we become victims of scam, we go to the social media. Whereas in our ministry, we have the tribunal where they can actually claim, they can do their claims, but then they go to social media. And then there's lots of situations where they keep complaining and they expect the government to control everything, which the government can't. I mean, we cannot be controlling everything, because if we control everything, we will not be a free market economy and everything will crumble. It will crash, yeah? You know what I mean? It will crash. So we'll be like North Korea or something. So it's not what we want to see. It cannot go on like that. So we have to be smarter. We have to empower ourselves. On the part of the ministry, I've actually I'm working on the intervention plan on how we can advocate, do more advocacy with the consumers, especially young people, because you are the future. And if you, for now, can decide, make the right decisions, make the right choices, yeah, I'm sure that the economy, I mean, the supply will have to follow according to what is the requirement of the consumers. So this is my perspective, and I think that we can actually do something great here. With regards to circular economy, I'm also thinking about this cooking oil. One of the reasons, apart from ketirisan, one of the reasons is that we have the micro industries. There's about 1.5 million micro industries. The makcik-makcik selling goreng pisang and keropok lekor, that should not be buying the subsidized cooking oil, but we close one eye to them buying the cooking oil from the shelves of the supermarket. Why? Because they also have difficulties making ends meet. Because with 1 kilogram of cooking oil, subsidized cooking oil, which is RM2.50, we subsidize about RM4.40, which is a huge amount. So we're thinking, if we force the micro industry to sell back the used oil, if we force them, we actually can offer the cooking oil maybe at RM4 and they sell it back at RM3.80 per kg. Or we sell it for RM4.50 to them, and they still make profit. Yeah, so these are what we're looking at and exploring. But again, data, they're not registered and so on. It will take time, but these are ideas that we're working on. Okay.
Thank you so much, YB Fuzia. So now I'd actually like to open up the floor to a quick Q&A session. So how it will work is that if you have a question, you can raise your hand and a mic will be brought to you.
Can I just see a couple of show of hands of those with questions? I see 1 here, 2, 3, 4. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 there. So we will be taking 4 questions. We'll do them one by one, starting with this.
Yeah, thank you so much for your insightful presentation. My name is Johnny. I'm from ASB and University Malaya Sustainability Unit, all this thing. So just something add on to the subsidy discussion here. So there's a one report from World Bank say what happens if Malaysia don't offer any subsidy? Because our current inflation stand about 2.8 to 3.3%. So if we don't offer any subsidy, our inflation will go up to 9 to 10%. So we need subsidy to mitigate a lot of this inflation. So one question about, because a lot of this income in Malaysia is spent on hawker, food, all this thing. There are many cases in which if you raise 10 cents on your sugar price all this cent, then all the coffee will raise by 10 cents per cup. So is there any mechanism, any policy to control and regulate this vendor where sometimes they don't pay tax, but they earn a lot of money, benefits, and they kind of abuse this case to make them hold accountable for their price mechanism? Thank you so much.
All right, interesting question. I'll give the floor to YB Fuzia, and perhaps Dr. Ong, would you like to add on a bit to that question? Okay, YB Fuzia can go first.
We have our Akta Kawalan Harga dan Anti Pencatutan. So in order to implement that, we have a database of what is the price throughout a few years, so that we know that there is profiteering, whether it takes place or not. So within, if it doesn't go beyond that, so it's not considered as pencatutan. Okay, so that's one control mechanism lah. But if there is any complaints, we will look into the matter. That's another mechanism. If any of the consumers think that this particular kopitiam or hawker is taking too much profit, then we have our aduan, our hotline, our complaint line, our portal to do the complaints, and then we will do the investigations. Yeah, the inflation rate is quite high, but it is on the decline. That's one good news, but it's still high. But what is pulling it up is the food. Ya, makanan sub kumpulan makanan dalam rumah dan makanan luar rumah, cooked food as well as ni. That's where our two initiatives, the menu rahmah is makanan bermasak, and our jualan rahmah targeted for jual barang-barang untuk to keep the price down. So if we don't subsidize the LPG, it will go up. If we don't the gula we don't subsidize, sugar we don't subsidize. We just keep the price, the ceiling price of 285. But the sugar producers, we have two companies, CSR and MSM. With every kilo of sugar that they produce, they lost 88 cents. So that is why recently we made an announcement where we allow them to produce premium sugar to address a certain market group. Whereas the sugar rakyat or the standard sugar, the gula biasa ni remains, and we have a mechanism to control to make sure that the production, the amount of production is the same. So we get them to report daily on how much they have produced for the day, so that 42,000 metric ton have to be complied. You know, the two pengeluar gula. So I agree with you, but it is on the decline. And hopefully, we will be able to manage that with whatever we are doing now, like all the control mechanisms right now. Thank you.
Yeah, maybe just to add one point that hasn't been discussed yet. We in Malaysia have something called the Competitions Commission. I believe MyCC sits under your ministry. And they are supposed to look for cases where there's collusion between the major players in the market for different sectors of the economy. They've done it before, in certain cases, the most famous being AirAsia and MAS. Of course, the companies, these two companies in question, they appealed against the ruling, and the courts decided in favor of these two companies. And also recently, MyCC also had a case against the auto insurance companies to say that they were colluding in order to keep prices of the auto insurance high. You know, they appealed the decision. The courts also found in their favor. So I think this is one area where I think the anti-competitive laws perhaps needs to be strengthened. The Competition Commission perhaps also needs to be empowered to perhaps even investigate things like mergers and acquisitions. In Europe, for example, and even in the US, if any two parties were to come together, or two companies were to come together to control more than a certain segment of the marketplace, there would be government agencies that can potentially block it. By Malaysia, MyCC doesn't have this kind of authority. So for example, when you know, one of the companies in Malaysia that bought over another company to control the cement sector, more than 80% of the cement sector is actually controlled by one particular company now. They were able to increase prices quite significantly as a result of their market power. So this is one area where I think we also need to pay some attention to.
Before we go to the next question, why we would like to add on something to that?
Yeah, on that front, what Dr. Ong just mentioned, MyCC we are in the middle of a process of drafting a bill and bringing it to Parliament on the anti-merger regime. So we don't have Anti-Monopoly Act at the moment, but that's one thing that we can look into. And we are also looking very closely at how cartels work and how we can reduce that. So it has already been passed in Cabinet for this new amendment to the bill. Thank you.
All right, before we move on, maybe perhaps why we should explain cartels, because sometimes when you say cartels, like the general public might have a different idea. Would you explain? Would you explain a little bit what a cartel is?
Okay, monopoly is not wrong in this country because we don't have a law. Yeah, we don't have a law, and then there is another what we call dominant position. A company is considered dominant when it has more than 60%, when it controls more than 60% of the market share. So they will only buat salah if they abuse their dominant position. Okay, if they abuse their dominant position. But cartels ni is a situation where it is not a monopoly. Sometimes people get confused. They think monopoly saja yang boleh control. No, cartel is when you have a few companies, tapi for example chicken feed, yeah, they control the price of the chicken feed. They pakat lah. Itu ada cartel. They pakat. So semua yang bela ayam, yeah, all the industry players will have to buy the chicken feed at the same price, because all of these people who does the import pakat on the price, and 70% of the cost of production of chicken and eggs is on the feed. 70%. So imagine if the cartel work on that and then they control the price, and susah. So that's what's happening.
All right, thank you for that. So basically, when there's cartels, when different companies who are supposed to compete to provide the best price to the customers, but instead work together to keep prices at a certain level, so obviously it undermines the power of the customers.
Thank you so much, YB Fuzia and Dr. Ong, for your insights. Could we take another question from the floor?
Thank you. My name is Andrew Koo. I know we've been talking about the rising cost of living, but one of the challenges facing young people, especially these days, is the rising cost of housing. Most of the houses in major urban areas here and elsewhere cost in excess of, let's say, 700,000 ringgit. If you apply, as we still have, Bumiputra discounts to a 700,000 ringgit house at 7%, that's 49,000 ringgit off the price. Recently on PPR, the government has announced that it's offering to sell PPR housing at 45,000 ringgit. So every time somebody takes a Bumiputra discount of 7% on a 700,000 ringgit house, you're effectively, in a sense, depriving someone of a PPR housing. Is there any intention on the part of government to stop Bumiputra discounts for people who have already reached a certain level of income, so that we apply these kinds of discounts, or you can call them rebates or whatever, to those who are in need, but not those who are in greed? Thank you.
Thank you so much for the question. Could I direct this to YB Prabha?
Thank you. It was an interesting question. Touching into PPR houses, yes, we know the flaws, and recently we met up with all the MPs and the Prime Minister. We spoke about this, where the PPR houses being sold at that cost of price. I think basically the price is affordable, and of course the house is not as big as you think. They have 1 room or 2 rooms, and it's less than 600 square feet. But the problem here is, once they have bought over the house or they rent the house through DBKL, after certain years, they can buy the house, or they can, whoever already bought, they can sell the house to a different person, whereby we are losing. Because if you sell the house, which belongs to a Golongan B40, to a M40, which they can buy the house easily with the amount of 50 to 60,000, that means we already lose 1 house for the poor family. So we decided to look into the policies, and if the B40s who are staying in the PPR already bought a house, now they want to change to a bigger house, they want to sell the current PPR house, they should sell it back to the government with the market value. So that are the policies we are looking into, whereby we can replace the owner and give it, by DBKL taking back the house, they can rent it to another poor family who is requesting for the house. Of course, the demand of houses is very high nowadays, and if you want to rent a room also, is more than 1,000, whereby it's not easy for the students, or even the hostels are nowadays full. I think we need to look into the affordable homes, the Rumah Mampu Milik, which is introduced by many administrative before this, and now the current one, which I said just now in my speech yesterday, we launched parking, bangunan parking in Metropolitan Kepong, whereby the affordable house there is 1,000 square feet, and the price of the house is 150,000. It's really something amazing, which I feel a lot of youngsters need to look into this. But there is also conditions, because developer cannot build 1,000 square feet of houses with the price of houses 150,000. Therefore, we need to come up with a solution whereby government give them free land to build these affordable houses. So that is also which the government is currently looking into it. And there's a lot of success stories. Maybe I can share it later after meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, YB Prabha, for answering that question. Could we take another question from the floor?
Yeah, hello, my name is Rainer. So lately there's been some discussion about bringing back GST. I think IMF, they suggested this month, early this month, that Malaysia to bring back GST, and then I think last month or last 2 months, Rafidi said he doesn't completely rule out that the government will bring it back. So what is your, do you think there's a probability that the government will bring it back, and do you personally supporting it? And also, what do you think, if that happen, what do you think will happen to our cost of living? Thank you.
Okay. I think having been on the side where we campaign against the GST, and then having been in government whereby I also had a lot of opinions expressed to me by business people of the benefits of the GST, as well as some challenges, because many of them actually were not getting back their GST refunds in a timely way. I would say that there are good reasons for the reintroduction of the GST, but perhaps at a lower rate. Instead of at 6%, maybe have it at 4% initially. The reason is because it would plug some of the leakages that are existing out there from under declaration on the SST. And then also, it gives a certain kind of transparency for the government for potential increases in government revenue later to go and pay for other things that we want to give back to the people through better social protection, through better income transfers to the B40 community, through better public infrastructure, public services that will be enjoyed largely by the B40 and the M40. So, you know, there are good reasons for that, but it cannot be discussed in isolation. You have to talk about the reasons why you want to collect more tax as well through GST. You cannot just talk about the efficiency of the GST without talking about, oh, we want extra money to spend on X, Y, Z. And I think most people, you know, if let's say you can assure them that the money will be spent in a way that is transparent, efficient, targeted, even if let's say they have to pay more taxes, you know, they will be willing to do this. But the trust in government right now, I think, is not that high for various reasons. So the government needs to be able to increase that trust level slowly over time and put itself in a place where the introduction of a GST will not be too politically harmful.
All right, YB Prabha would like to add on?
Just because Amelia asked me to add on, I add on. I think GST is one of a good mechanism for government to get the fund. And GST is where you cannot escape from the government. You have to pay tax somehow or other. But it is not a bright idea now. With the current state of economy, the global market, I don't think so GST is suitable now. Maybe once Malaysia is back to the ASEAN tiger, maybe that time, maybe it's an idea. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for that. We have one more question.
Thank you, members of the floor. My name is Eri. I noticed that this cost of living issue has been an issue for a long time. even during Patla's administration back in 2008, or KJ's administration, so to speak. When they removed the subsidy for petrol, there was a lot of protests. And here we are again talking about rising cost of living. So in other words, we're running around in circles, with due respect to YB Prabhakaran on the circularization theory. So the issue, but my question is, the conversation has always been about subsidies, whether to remove, whether to maintain, but there's hardly a lot of chatter on wages and how do we increase or enhance wages. During Datuk Sri Najib's time, there was talk about breaking the middle income trap through the economic transformation program and whatnot. But we hardly hear about that now. And I think that's important because back during my father's time, he said, when I graduated, I had 2,000 ringgit as salary. Houses were like 200,000 ringgit. But when I graduated, salary was only 3,000. But the cost of housing is already 600 or 700,000, like the other gentleman pointed out. So what can be done to increase wages and also ensure that we break that middle income trap? So that's my question. Thanks.
Back to what I said earlier about the initiative Pendapatan Rakyat. This is something that the Ministry of Economy and Minister Rafizi himself is looking at very, very closely. And we do need to work hard on that, because otherwise we will never be able to address the cost of living issue. So I agree with you that subsidies is not the answer, but we have to depend on it right now. The wages is the answer, and so that everyone have a disposable income high enough, for that people will not feel the pinch of the cost of living. For example, now even when we put the minimum wage at 1,005, even the employers are not able to comply. So we have that difficulty, and we all know that 1,005 is barely enough for a family of 5 living in the city. Barely enough. Yeah, they cannot makan. They will makan once a day only, So that's where the Bako Rama come in, the Menu Rama and everything. But seriously, I agree. So what are the initiatives? There are a few initiatives that Rafizi have already announced, but I think more needs to be done. And also another front that we're looking at TVET. We're looking at TVET, and hopefully the graduates from TVET education should be able to match with the industries, and that should bring in a higher income level for the TVET graduates.
Okay, yeah, a good point that the gentleman made just now. A couple of responses. Firstly, the Economic Transformation Program projected that Malaysia would reach status of high-income nation by 2020 with GDP per cap, or the term they use, GNI per cap, of about 48,000 ringgit per person. We would have reached that level in 2020 even without the ETP. That was what I said when it first came out, and we would have reached it if not for COVID. So we actually achieved 53,000 ringgit GDP per capita at the end of 2022, Q4. So in effect, we are already a high-income nation, but at the bottom level, just by numbers alone. And I would also make the argument that Klang Valley is in effect already a developed country status. Some of you may not agree, but if you travel to around the world and if you compare the kind of infrastructure, the kind of services, the kind of restaurants, hotels, the kind of infrastructure that we have, we would be already there. So your question is, what can we do more of? Right? So I'll respond the following way. Firstly, there's got to be much more discussion with regards to regional inequality. One of the reasons why companies cannot comply with the 1,500 ringgit minimum wage is because of places like Sabah, Sarawak. Right? You want to do minimum wage of 1,500 ringgit for a manufacturing job in Penang, in Klang Valley, and in Johor. You won't get anyone to work for you because they're already paying about 2,000-3,000, and if you add in the overtime and all that, probably even more. right? So that kind of regional inequality part is very important. That also includes bringing manufacturing jobs, which again may not be so sexy, but they provide good wages, especially if, let's say, it is foreign direct investments, multinational companies from Europe, from Japan, from Korea, from the US, from China, going to places like Sabah and Sarawak, giving these kinds of good quality jobs. So the regional inequality part needs to be addressed. A second issue would be the sort of like creation of better paying jobs by large local corporates as well as FDI or MNCs which are coming into the country. Right? I know, we should not be over dependent on MNCs and whatnot, but without the MNCs, we would not have the kind of diversified economic system we have today, with the investments in Penang and the E&E sector, with the many financial institutions that are here in the Klang Valley, with the different global business service centers that are dotted around Subang Jaya, right? So these are the kind of jobs that can sort of like bring the overall level up. And then the large local corporates will also have to compete because they are competing for talent, right? And this is where we can sort of like increase the kind of wages in these kinds of jobs. And then probably the last one I think would be using, I put it very specifically, using technology to link it to productivity as well as education, right? And this is something that I think we don't do enough of, in the sense that, even for TVET, even for university, whatever stuff that you learn here, you may not be able to apply the skills and the knowledge and the technology in a way that would enhance your productiveness when you go out into the marketplace, right? That's why, for example, we have 30% of our graduate workforce, according to DOSM, having mismatch of jobs. That means what they studied in school is not what they are working as now, which I think is okay if, let's say, you are able to use similar skills that you've developed in order to increase your value-added contribution to the company and also to the sector that you're in. So these kinds of things actually require some government planning and policies. I think more plans will be announced in August. I'm, for example, involved in the new industrial master plan under MITI. I'm one of the people reviewing that task force. There are going to be announcements by the Minister of Economy, by the Minister of Finance, by the Ministry of Science and Technology, and a few others. I'm privy to some of the plans, but not suitable to announce here. And I think at the end of the day, what the Rakyat really wants to see is how these policies are actually implemented by not just the government, but also including the private sector, and including perhaps even some of the institutions of higher learning in the public as well as the private sector. So it requires a whole of government and whole of society approach to really take us to the next level. I don't think we need another economic transformation program with all the different entry point projects, but we do need sort of like a new and enhanced economic vision that gives us very specific details on how we want to get to the next level.
Thank you so much to everyone who asked questions. Could I please ask all the speakers to give your final thoughts before we wrap up today's session?
I'm actually cautiously optimistic that we are at the worst of this inflationary trend. That's the first point I want to make. Because we can see a lot of businesses have adjusted to the conflict in Russia and Ukraine. Hopefully the events that are happening in Russia today doesn't degenerate into something more troubling. And you can see even the Federal Reserve, even though I think they are going to increase the rates, the federal funds rate by another 2 times this year, but you can see the rate of inflation, like what YB Fuzia said just now, is slowing around the world. And I think because there are many reasons for that, one of which is because the global supply chains post-COVID have sort of like normalized. So those kinds of short-term inflationary pressures, I think the worst of it is over. The second reason why I'm cautiously optimistic: education resources, good human capital, and good physical infrastructure is still there. Our ability to be able to latch on to this new wave of AI enhancements and technologies, I think, is not too bad. We're not the best. We're not China. We're not the US. but we're not the worst either. We're somewhere in between, like we've always had. But this is where I think better coordination on the part of government together with the private sector can really lead us to what I would call a second takeoff, to be able to repeat some of the successes that we had in the 1990s. So I'm cautiously optimistic because of that. And then the third thing that I just want to highlight is that we're in a very good position in Malaysia and in Southeast Asia now, because there's so much interest and interest from an investor and also geopolitical perspective in Southeast Asia because of the conflict that's happening between the United States and China. And from my position as a former Deputy Minister of MITI, I can see the interest in terms of FDI coming into Southeast Asia, including Malaysia, is very high. And we need to be able to take advantage of this in the next 5 to 10 years, not just from the perspective of taking advantage of these direct FDIs, but creating a sort of like more vibrant ASEAN market and also ASEAN ecosystem, whereby we emerge as a region stronger than before, so that we can go out and face external competition in a much more robust manner. So, don't lose hope. I think things are getting better, and they will get better.
So I think the final YB Fuzial. So thank you very much, Youth Pack, for inviting me, having me here, and thank you guys for sitting here around 1.5 hours listening to us. Some of them are writing a lot of notes. I hope it's helpful. And as a leader, actually I'm 27 years old. I became an MP when I was 22. So since I'm here, I would like to also encourage you all to not only 100% hope on the government, you all should be successful in your own field. And basically, we government or the leaders will definitely encourage and guide you in whatever sectors it is, whether it's in education or industry or within government. If you are looking forward to enhance in agriculture, the government is giving fund for you all to run agriculture, and there's IPR, and there's Belia Rahma, and there's so many initiatives. And please do follow my Facebook or Instagram if you want to have a lot of initiatives done by government. Thank you very much.
I'd just like to finish off by saying that political stability is very, very important. Political stability, racial harmony, these are very important factors to bring in FDIs. And our Prime Minister is committed to eradicate hardcore poverty. And there is disparity in terms of income level, and there is a huge chunk of the population that is feeling the pinch of the cost of living due to COVID and so on. But we are recovering, and hopefully with more investors coming to the country. We are facing challenges with regards to our value of the ringgit right now, but hopefully we will also overcome that in a very short time. And I'm also hopeful. I echo Kian Ming's what he's saying about hope for the future, and I hope that this government will stay, and that this government will provide the policies to bring us forward, because we have inherited quite a lot of policies that we have to undo today, and then we have to correct, and we are working very hard, I assure you. And we would like to see Malaysia prosper and go back to the time of the Asian tiger. Pray that we'll be able to do that. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, everyone, and thank you so much to all of the speakers, YB Fuzia, YB Prabha, and Dr. Ong. It's been a pleasure, everyone, but before we end, I'd like to invite all of the speakers for a quick photo session. At the same time, can we put on the QR codes for the feedback for this current session? On your right is a feedback session. Please let us know, please give us your honest feedback. We would love to learn from you. And on the left is to check in, not for the next session, but you can also check in, register for tomorrow. We would love to hear from you, so please do so. Thank you so much, everyone. Can I please have the slides on the booth on? For those of you who are here, I hope you don't go back home straight. We still have the booths happening on campus. As you can see, these are the organizations that have put up the booth for you to visit. So please go on and head on to the Grand Hall area. You will be able to meet all of them and, you know, learn more about the advocacy work that they're doing. They'll be very, very happy to see you, so please spend some time on that. With that said, Kira, would you like to say thank you?
Thank you, everyone.
All right, short and sweet, and thank you so much, everyone. See you tomorrow.